Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you. Featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today my guest is Ed Murray. He's been singing and dancing since age 5, when his mother first taught him the polka, and performed throughout his youth. When it came time for college, he decided to pursue a double major in theater arts and English education, and for the past 3 decades has both taught and performed. I want to welcome to my show Ed Murray.
Thank you so much.
Now, Ed, you have been teaching for many, many years, but
Yes.
I know that you've probably fallen in love with performing and singing and composing and doing so many things. Now, how did that sort of fit in with your teaching?
When I told my parents that I wanted to major in theater, my parents convinced me that I needed something to fall back on. So I ended up getting a letter from a local university in April of my senior year of high school that offered me the opportunity to do a double major in the arts and in education. And given the fact that my English teacher in high school was also the drama director, I said I could follow in her footsteps. Let me do that. And so I did the double major in theater arts and English education. And 4 years later, I graduated from CW Post on Long Island and was fortunate enough to land a full-time teaching job right out of college at the age of 21.
Yeah.
So I started to teach, and I was at William Floyd out in Mastic Beach for 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Now, our audience comes from all over the world, and so I want you to tell them some of the roles that you played that you found just so amazing and so exciting. Tell our audience all about that, and keep in mind that our audience are many, many different kinds of people, so I want you to tell them a little about why those particular shows.
Okay. My 2 favorite roles that I've ever played include Vernon Gersh in They're Playing Our Song, which was originally on Broadway starring Robert Klein and Lucy Arnaz. And then my other favorite role was the role of Georges in La Cage aux Folles.
You know, La Cage aux Folles happened to be one of my favorites because it was just so, it was so comical and it was so lovely and it was about a love story. It had so very much. Now, when you decided to play the role of Georges in that play, how did it make you feel? Wasn't it fun?
Oh, it was a blast. I had originally hoped to be cast in the other role of Albin. And I thought that that would be an incredibly challenging role. And it turned out that I was offered the role of Georges, and I just wanted to do this show because it is, like you said, such a fantastic love story, and it's so much fun. And in retrospect, I am so glad that I didn't have to play the role of Albin in this production, that I got to play Georges, because I just identified with Georges so well, and I didn't have to deal with the stress of learning how to dress in drag and all of that.
Right. Now, when I went to see La Cage aux Folles on Broadway, I remember that the audience loved that show so much that they gave it a huge standing ovation.
I believe that.
Oh, it was so much fun to see how people felt about that. Now, let's change our kind of the direction that I'm going to take you in, and let's talk about some of the stories that you experienced during your career. And first, tell us some of the things when your students learned that you're also an actor. I mean, what did they say to you? Were they proud of you? Were they intrigued? Tell us about how your students responded to you.
As a matter of fact, with the show that I'm premiering this weekend, I have some students who are going to come into New York City to see the show with their parents. I have always been very, very supported by my students and their families, and I'm very grateful for that. And I use the talents that I was given in my classroom. I sing and create songs, and I write parodies to teach whatever it is that I might be teaching. And I have no problem getting up in front of the kids and tap dancing and singing for them. And it's a lot of fun, and it really brings them closer to me and me closer to them.
Mm-hmm. So you just mentioned that you're in a show this coming weekend. I want you to kind of address a little bit more about the show, where it's going to be, and some of the other things that you think are necessary for the audience to know about it.
Okay. I am premiering my 10th cabaret show. It is entitled Songs My Mother Loved, and that's one of the reasons why I'm actually premiering it on Mother's Day. I ended up connecting with a publicist whose name is Richard Skipper, and over the summer when I mentioned the show to him, he suggested that we premiere it on Mother's Day because of the theme. And it was actually a brainchild of mine from a few years ago when I remembered that there were a number of songs that I grew up with that my mother had always wanted me to sing. And when I was an adolescent in New Hyde Park on Long Island, and there was a community theater there, my mom had said to me, why don't you ask the director if you could sing this song or if you could sing that song or whatever? And I was too shy, and I said, I can't do that, Mom. But I kept that list of songs on the back burner. And then 2 years ago, I thought of that list again, and I said, oh my goodness, this would make a really good theme for a show, especially at this point in my life, now that a number of decades have passed since my mom first suggested that I sing these various songs. So I'm premiering this show on Sunday, this Sunday, May 8th, at the Metropolitan Room on West 22nd Street in New York City, and that's between 5th and 6th Avenues, and I go up at 4 p.m.
Now, since you mentioned that Sunday is Mother's Day, and I suppose that all over the country and perhaps all over the world, young people celebrate Mother's Day with their family. And you mentioned your mother was always one of your big supporters.
Yes.
Now, that's great, even though I'm sure your mother knew it was a struggle. It would be a struggle for you and virtually anybody who wants to enter that field.
Exactly.
But she still supported you and pushed you to do it?
She supported me and pushed me to do it, again, as long as I had something to fall back on. And that's one of the main reasons why I ended up going into education and doing the double major. And then, unfortunately, by the time I was 22, I had lost both of my parents. And after 5 years of teaching, I left for a while to pursue performing, to figure out whether I went into teaching for me or whether I went into teaching for my mom and dad. Mm-hmm. And I realized after a year and a half that even though I was getting a little bit of work here and there, and I actually have some people with whom I'm still friendly from shows that I did back then, I realized that I missed the classroom and I needed to be the academic that I was. Now, I've reached 31 years in the classroom. I'm retiring next month, and now, because of that situation, I will be able to pursue my greatest passions of performing, directing, and writing, and take it where it will take me, wherever that may be.
Now, I'm going to get into a little more about the show and some of the songs and things of that nature, but first I want to get some ideas from you. Now, you know that the arts have been cut out of many of the schools, and it's been a terrible thing, I believe.
Yes,
and
I agree.
So what would you say to, say, the boards of education or to anybody who had influence in what goes on in the schools? What would you say to them?
The importance of the arts cannot be underestimated. Research shows that kids who are involved in arts programs, whether they're art, music, dance, drama, whatever it might be, end up developing not only an appreciation for those things, but their brain develops a little bit differently than those who really don't participate in enough of those activities. And the arts are ways to express things, to express ideas, to show what kids are thinking, and when they can connect to whatever art form they're interested in, they just thrive. So it's really important that we continue to support arts programs in our schools across the country.
Absolutely. Now, let's get a little more into the show. Now, how did you, you kind of told me this, but I want to ask you once again, how did you conceive of the show, and why and how is it called Songs My Mother Loved?
Like I said, my mother had suggested songs for me to sing in our community theater variety shows, and I just didn't feel like I could be so forward and say, I'd like to do this song, I'd like to do that song. But as a result of remembering those songs and having such good times with them, like I said, I put them on the back burner, and they ended up being perfect for this show. Of course, because of when my mother was alive and when I was growing up, the songs are from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and they are from, or they were performed originally by male singers, and I represent a variety of artists and their popular and even some of their obscure songs, a variety of artists, including Johnny Mathis, Jim Croce, Bobby Darin, and, of course, Frank Sinatra.
Mm-hmm. Now, these songs are songs from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, as you have said. Now, you've worked with kids, and kids are actually coming to your show. Can they relate to that music? And would you do me a favor? I know that I'm putting you on the spot, but I'd like you to kind of give me a little verse from a couple of different songs. Can you do that for me?
Oh, yes, you are putting me on the spot. Okay. I open with an arrangement by Sammy Davis Jr. of A Wonderful Day Like Today. On a wonderful day like today, I defy any cloud to appear in the sky, dare any raindrop to plop in my eye on a wonderful day like today. And I am always trying to get kids to see the positive in things, and that I think that they can relate to and will relate to immediately. Another of the songs that I do, which I said earlier that one of the artists is Jim Croce. As a matter of fact, I used the song Bad Bad Leroy Brown, which is one of the songs that my mother loved, that I actually learned how to dance to, I learned the Lindy to, and I've actually used that song in recent years in the dance program that I developed at the school where I currently teach, which is Mineola High School, again on Long Island. And my kids ate that song up, and it's a song where the verse goes, bad, bad Leroy Brown, the baddest man in the whole damn town, badder than old King Kong, meaner than a junkyard dog. And the kids got a real kick out of it.
Now, what do you attribute to that? That's, bad, bad Leroy Brown. Well, there are a lot of bad people in this world. Is that why they love that song? What do you attribute to what makes a kid want to listen to that?
I think what makes that number in particular so interesting for the kids is how upbeat it is, how lively it is, and how you just can't help but move when you hear it.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, teaching a dance class and using that, as soon as I introduced the steps to the kids and then put the music on right after, it just was a perfect meeting of the mind, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Now, in the 60s, one of the most famous groups happened to be the Beatles. And I always tell the story of how I loved Broadway music. I had a chance to visit a place called the Boys and Girls Club in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother would take me there, and I would listen to all this wonderful, wonderful Broadway music, and it stuck with me. And then one day, a friend of mine came over to me and said, "Aren't you in love with the Beatles?" And I said, "The Beatles? Who's the Beatles?" Now, you must know a lot of Beatles songs, and you must understand why the Beatles are so great. What would you say about them? What was it about them that made them great?
Well, interestingly enough, I'm not highlighting any Beatles numbers in this show because I'm doing songs that were released by solo artists. My sister, who's 10 years older than me, basically grew up with the Beatles. And as a result of her growing up with the Beatles, of course, we heard the Beatles music in the house regularly, besides the songs that my mother played along with, whatever my father wanted to hear too. And I think it was the fact that they were so down to earth and that their tunes were singable and their lyrics were relatable.
Yeah.
And they were very cute to look at, and the girls at the time just thought that they were, forgive the cliche, the cat's meow.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's very true. I mean, I remember when I did become familiar with them thinking that, wow, if you listen to their music, it's kind of like poetry.
Yes.
And that brings up that whole issue of poetry. The music that, say, Cole Porter wrote, or one of the greats, and you probably could talk about some of those, but weren't they like poetry if you listen to them?
Absolutely, and as a matter of fact, throughout my entire teaching career as an English teacher, when I taught a poetry unit, I'm currently teaching a poetry unit now, I bring in songs. I bring in song lyrics. I actually write my own parodies of songs and show the kids that you can do this. They can do this. And we have a great time with that.
Mm-hmm. Isn't the new rap a kind of poetry for
the
kids?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so here we go again. I'm going to say to you, okay, so here I would like you to, if you can give us a little taste again of your poetry now, that would be interesting. And who's your favorite poet?
Well, of course, my favorite poet is Shakespeare. As a theater person, as an English teacher, the Bard is the epitome to me. In terms of poetry that I've written, I actually developed a rap a number of years ago to help kids with understanding certain things that they should or should not do when they write.
Right. Do you remember any of it?
I do, yes.
Well, go for it. Come on,
okay. Ed. Never begin a sentence with well, or the reader will think that you're a dumbbell. Try not to start a sentence with because. If you do, your sentences could have many flaws. Kinda gonna cool and stuff are never to be written. If you do, your lazy butt will end up being bitten. The expression a lot is always two words. If you write it as one, your paper will be full of turds.
That's terrific.
Thank you.
My gosh. Now you should record that, and because the kids will love it.
Well, as a matter of fact, that was one verse that I wrote about 10 years ago, and then a couple of years ago I created a couple of other verses, and I did a poor man's copyright on it. I typed it up. I sent it to myself in the snail mail, and I have that. And once I retire and once I get my things going, I think I'm going to take your advice and find a way to record it and make it work for kids.
Definitely. And you know what would also be interesting, and I'm just wondering whether you've thought of this, and that is that if you took some of the music that you now sing that is just some of the most popular songs from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and you turned it into rap and you turned it into poetry and you wrote it down and you made a little book all about it, that would be sensational, don't you think?
Thank you. It could be, yes. And in your mentioning that, I just remembered that the way I teach the literary concept of illusion, a reference to a previous piece of art or music or literature, I teach it through a parody that I wrote of Maria from West Side Story, where it originally says, Maria, I just met a girl named Maria. I've done illusion. There's nothing quite like an illusion. And then I explain what an illusion is and how it works through the rest of the song.
Now,
and
what is an illusion? What is an illusion? Come on.
An illusion, like I said, it's a reference to another piece of art, literature, or music that came before. So, for example, when you look at the title of The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, which is one of the books that I've taught for many years now. I've taught that to my juniors for many years. The title actually comes from a Robert Burns poem. And there's a line in it about being the catcher in the rye. And there are other references as well in there that Salinger has his protagonist, Holden Caulfield, refer to. Also, when I taught ninth grade for many years, we did Of Mice and Men. And the title of Mice and Men, John Steinbeck's novel, comes from another Robert Burns poem called To a Mousie. And the phrase Of Mice and Men is actually part of a larger statement that says, the best laid plans of mice and men oft gang agley, which actually means the best laid plans of mice and men can go wrong. And that's exactly what happens in the course of the novel. I won't give you any more details because I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it.
Yeah, that's great. Now, it seems that some of the music that you love and some of the people whom you've met have created a very interesting life for you. You are taking now the advantage, and I want to say that in a positive way, of turning something that you love so much and your mother recommended to you into your career. So what I'd like to know is, what do you hope will happen with your show after you premiere it this weekend?
That's a great question. Thank you so much for asking. One of my dreams has been, of course, to be in a Broadway show. But even if I never get in a Broadway show, one thing that I learned years ago from my very first musical theater voice teacher / coach was that she did cabaret acts on the condo circuit all over the country. And so I would love to take this show, because it is so appropriate for a senior citizen audience. I would love to take it to the various 55 and older communities throughout the nation. And I also am an avid cruiser. My partner and I have been on a number of cruises together. And one of my biggest dreams is to perform on a cruise ship, on cruise ships. And as a matter of fact, this past summer when we were on one particular cruise, I talked to the cruise director and I mentioned the idea of this show that I would be premiering this weekend, and she thought it was a great idea and that I should go for it.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. I mean, my husband and I find cruising kind of an interesting thing to do in our lives today. We never thought about it until we started it, and then suddenly we fell in love with it because there's so much fabulous, and I say fabulous, entertainment on cruises.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
What a way to kind of get to know some people who not always became famous, but boy, are they good. They're so good. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to see you do that and accomplish all your dreams.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Now, so I always like to say to my guest, if you had something to say to the audience, what would it be?
One of the reasons why I feel the need to entertain is because I was given these talents for a reason. And I know how joyous I feel as a result of performing. And even when I sing in my classroom and see the kids' smiles light up the room, I said, that is a feeling that just exceeds all feelings. And to be able to bring my life full circle now, especially with retiring and with doing these songs that are now songs that the senior citizens in particularly appreciate, it just seems to be the absolute right thing, and that the universe has come together for me so beautifully.
Oh, that's so great. Now, I want you to repeat for our audience how where you're going to be this week, and also tell them what you're up to and how they get in touch with you. And if you have a CD out, why don't you talk about that as well?
Currently, I don't have a full CD out, and I'm in the process of putting together one for the near future. I do have a website. It's www.edmurray.me. That's EDMURRAY.me, M-E. And currently it's advertising my show. It tells about how I conceived the show. It presents some of my biography that you referred to earlier. And what else did you want me to address?
Well, I just want people to know how they get in touch with you, and you've given them that. And and if
the date and time of the show.
That's right. So you're going to be at which place? And
I'm going to be at the Metropolitan Room on West 22nd Street between 5th and 6th Avenues this Sunday, May 8th at 4 p.m.
Well, good luck with your wonderful, and it really sounds like a wonderful show, and I hope that the audience will be full and you'll have a great future, maybe being on cruises. And
I hope so.
And also doing the circuit among all the different 55-year and older places. So you've been a great guest, Ed Murray. It's so pleasing to listen to you sing and do your poetry, and we're very lucky to have you. So thank you again for being on the Susan Brender Show.
Oh, thank you. You've really been so kind and welcoming and warm and supportive. I really appreciate that.
Thank you for listening to the Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.